Hello. In this video, we're going to continue to explore Boolean operators and how we implement them in Java, and we're going to look at specifically the AND operator. So let's dive in, shall we? So to learn about the AND operator, we're going to actually change a piece of code that already exists. And to start with, we're going to take a look and see if we can guess what the output of this program will be. It's really important that you can read some code and predict the output. That's something that you'll have to do regularly in your practices, and if you're interested in writing any exams, for example the AP exam or an external certification exam, you have to read code and be able to say what the output is. So my first question to you is, if I hit run on this program, what is it going to run? So I'm going to hit it now, and if I run it, what do we get? We get requirement not met. So let's see if we can figure out what the requirement is. Let's drag this over just a little bit. That's better. So in this program, we declare an integer called a, and we give it a value of 100. And then we come to a conditional statement. We say if a is less than 100, and in this case, we ask ourselves, is a less than 100? And the answer is no. So it jumps down to here and prints out the else and says requirement isn't met. And so that's why if I run this, I get requirement not met. Well, let's set this to 101. And now let's ask ourselves what this is going to output. So we start off by reading this line. We say a is 101 if a is less than 100, and a is still greater than 100, so it's going to jump down to here and say requirement not met. Perfect. Let's set this to 99. And we run this. The requirement's still not met, but let's look at why now. We have int a set to 99, so if a is less than 100, so is 99 less than 100? And the answer is yes. So that condition is true, so we enter the code block here, the conditional block. So we now say if a mod 2 is equivalent to 0. So is 99 mod 2 equivalent to 0? And we know the answer to that is no, so it skips this if statement and goes to the else associated with it and says requirement not met. And then once it finishes this else, it finishes the larger if and then finishes the whole program. So now, let's put 98 and watch what happens. Requirements met. So what we see is we have if a is less than 100, it is less than 100, so it comes in. If a mod 2 is equivalent to 0, 98 mod 2 is equivalent to 0, so therefore the requirement is met. And so once it finishes this if statement, it skips down to outside this else one, comes to here, and then jumps out and finishes the program. So what we can ascertain from this is that the requirements for this program is that a has to be less than 100, and a has to be divisible by 2, meaning a has to be an even number. So listen to what I said here. A has to be less than 100, and a has to be divisible by 2. So this is a case where we could actually use our Boolean operator. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check both these conditions at the same time. And so in this if statement, I'm going to put an AND operator, a mod 2 is equivalent to 0. And now, if we check both these conditions in that same if statement, I can remove everything inside of there and simply put requirement met. So watch now if I run this, requirement met. So notice by using this AND operator here, I can check both conditions at the same time and significantly reduce the amount of code that I use. I want to point out one last subtlety. And this is a very subtle point, and it's not as important as beginning programmers, but it's really important later on. And it's the following. When Java evaluates this conditional statement, or this conditional statement, it evaluates it from left to right. So that means it's going to evaluate this first condition And then only if this condition is true is it going to evaluate this second condition. So it evaluates it from left to right and only evaluates further conditions if the first one is true. Now you might be saying, big deal. And to be perfectly honest, in many ways at this point in our programming development, it's not a big deal. But this is something that's really important when we start dealing with objects in some later examples. So again, the subtlety here, and it's all about the subtleties. When you're using the AND operator, Java will evaluate it from left to right. If the first condition fails, it will not bother evaluating the second condition or any further conditions. Okay? Last little point, that's a little less subtle, is you can actually string these together. I could add another AND. I could say AND A mod 3 is equivalent to 0. So now we have 3 conditions. All 3 of these have to be true in order for the requirement to be met. I hope that video helped.